Rust coated everything on Xylos. It clung to the ramshackle market stalls, dulled the edges of once gleaming machinery, and settled in the lungs of anyone foolish enough to breathe unfiltered air. Kale wiped sweat from his brow, leaving another streak of dirt across his weathered face. The desert planet's second sun was climbing toward zenith, making the air shimmer above the dented metal roofs of Rust Haven Market. He adjusted the small bag of salvage electronics parts slung over his shoulder, the sum total of 3 days scavenging in the western dunes. If he was lucky, these components might fetch enough credits for water filtration cartridges and food to last another week. If not, well, thirst was a cruel way to die, even by Xylos standards. The market buzzed with the usual desperate energy. Merchants barking inflated claims about their questionable wares, hagglers arguing over fractions of credits, and the omnipresent hum of jury-rigged cooling systems fighting a losing battle against the heat. Kale moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, his eyes constantly scanning for threats or opportunities. 5 years on this forsaken rock had taught him caution. 5 years since the reactor accident that wasn't his fault, but that had cost 47 lives and ended his engineering career with the Federation. 5 years of exile, scraping by on the margins, his considerable technical skills reduced to identifying salvageable parts in ancient wreckage. Water filters, he muttered to himself, heading toward Dima's stall. The old woman had a knack for acquiring relatively clean filtration units, though her prices grew steeper each month as Xylo's water table continued to recede. A commotion caught his attention before he reached Dima's corner of the market. A small crowd had gathered around one of the slave traders' platforms, a particularly distasteful fixture of Rust Haven, but one Kale had learned to ignore. The frontier worlds operated under their own rules, far from Federation oversight, and Xylos attracted the worst of them. "Final lot of the day," bellowed a tall man with synthetic skin grafts covering half his face. A slave trader named Jax whom Kale vaguely recognized. "Special discount. This one's damaged goods, but might be useful for parts." Kale should have continued walking, should have minded his own business as he always did. But something in the trader's sneering tone made him pause and look toward the platform. A young woman stood there, painfully thin, with a distant, vacant expression. Her dark hair was matted and cut unevenly, and a network of old scars traced along her neck and disappeared beneath her tattered gray shift. Most striking was her right arm, a prosthetic limb of unfamiliar design, clearly damaged. Portions of the outer casing were missing, exposing complex circuitry unlike anything in standard Federation tech. The arm hung limply at her side, occasionally twitching with unintended movement. 20 credits, starting bid, Jax announced, giving the woman a rough shake that she barely seemed to register. She can still work with one good arm. Might even be salvageable parts in that broke one, if you've got the skill. The small crowd laughed. Nobody raised a hand. Fine. 15 credits. She doesn't eat much, skin and bones, as you can see. More laughter, still no bids. 10 credits. That's below cost for me, friends. Anyone? 10 measly credits. Something shifted in the woman's empty gaze as her eyes drifted across the crowd. For the briefest moment, Kale thought he saw a flash of calculation there. Not the vacant stare of someone broken by cruelty, but something sharper, more deliberate. Her fingers on her human hand twitched slightly as she glanced at a rusting power generator nearby, the movement almost like she was running calculations in her mind. No taques. Jax was growing frustrated. Waste of oxygen, then? I'll dispose of her after the market closes. Kale knew what dispose meant on Xylos. Nobody wasted resources here, not even on a funeral. The woman would be processed for biological components. Her remaining organic parts sold to the organ traders who operated from the back rooms of Rust Haven. The crowd was already dispersing when Kale stepped forward. "I'll take her." Jax squinted at him suspiciously. 10 credits, plus handling fee. Kale reached into his pocket and pulled out the only 10 credits he had, along with something far more valuable. A quantum processing chip he'd been saving to repair his grounded ship's navigation system. 10 credits, he said, placing them in Jax's outstretched hand. And this. He added the chip. Jax examined the processor, his cybernetic eye whirring as it scanned the component. His expression shifted from annoyance to surprise. This is military grade. Where'd you get it, scavenger? Does it matter? Kale kept his voice neutral. We have a deal. The slave trader grinned, revealing metal-grafted teeth. Sure do. He tossed a rusted control fob to Kale. She's linked to this. Shock collars embedded subcutaneous, left side of the neck. Standard control functions. She's all yours. Your problem now. Kale pocketed the control fob without looking at it. He had no intention of using it. He approached the platform, where the woman still stood motionless, though her eyes had tracked the exchange with subtle attention. Come on, he said quietly, avoiding the restraint chain that Jax held out to him. You can walk beside me. A ripple of laughter followed them as they left the platform. Kale caught fragments of mockery. Wasted a prime chip on that junk. Must be lonely out in the dunes. Probably just wants the parts. He ignored them all, maintaining a steady pace toward the market exit, the woman following silently behind. Only once did he glance back at her, and he found those dark eyes studying him with an intensity that contradicted her submissive posture. You're safe now, he said, though he wasn't sure if that was true for either of them. I'm good. The woman didn't respond, but she did match his pace, staying close as they navigated the winding paths that led away from Rust Haven and toward the outskirts of the settlement where Kale had made his home. The converted airship hangar that served as Kale's workshop and living quarters stood isolated at the edge of the settlement, half buried in sand on its windward side. Solar collectors, wind turbines, and a hodgepodge of salvage technology surrounded it, giving the structure the appearance of a metal creature sprouting bizarre appendages. It's not much, Kale said as they approached, but it's shelter. He pressed his palm against the scanner beside the reinforced door, one of the few pieces of technology he kept in perfect working order. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the cavernous interior. The hangar was chaotic but organized in a way that made sense to Kale. Workbenches cluttered with projects in various stages of completion, shelves laden with salvage parts categorized by potential use, a small living area cordoned off in one corner with fabric partitions, and dominating the center, the skeletal frame of a small spacecraft, Kale's perpetually unfinished escape plan. The woman hesitated at the threshold, her eyes rapidly scanning the interior. Kale noticed how her gaze lingered on potential weapons, exits, and power sources, the assessment of someone accustomed to calculating survival odds. You can come in or stay out, Kale said, moving inside. Your choice now. After a moment's consideration, she followed him inside, keeping her distance as the door sealed behind them. The temperature dropped immediately as the hangar's cooling system engaged, another luxury Kale prioritized in the desert climate. He moved to a storage container and retrieved a water pouch and a protein bar. Here, he said, placing them on a workbench between them rather than approaching her directly. You look like you need these. She didn't move toward the offerings. Kale sighed and pushed them closer to her side of the bench. It's not poisoned. Look, he took a small sip from the water pouch and broke off a piece of the protein bar, eating it without ceremony. The woman finally approached, movements cautious and efficient, and took the water. She drank with controlled sips despite what must have been intense thirst, the discipline of someone who had learned to ration everything. Kale busied himself unpacking his salvage bag, giving her space. I need to work on that arm of yours, he said without looking up. The neural interface is degrading. Must be painful. No response. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to use that control fob, either. He placed the fob on a workbench and crushed it with a heavy tool, the components shattering. The shock collar will have to be removed carefully, but I can do that once you trust me enough to let me near your neck with tools. Still nothing. Kale ran a hand through his dust-caked hair. Look, I don't know your name or your story. You don't have to tell me. But since you're not talking, I'm going to call you Echo. Seems fitting. For the first time, a flicker of something, perhaps amusement, crossed her face, though it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. You can sleep behind that partition, he continued, nodding toward his living area. There's a cot I use for storage. Clear it off if you want to use it. I usually sleep out here near my projects. Echo, since that was now her name until she offered another, took the protein bar and retreated to the indicated area, disappearing behind the fabric divider. Kale exhaled slowly. What had he done? He'd spent years avoiding entanglements, focusing solely on survival and the distant hope of someday repairing his ship enough to leave Xylos. Now he'd spent his last credits and his most valuable component on a damaged slave with a complex, prosthetic and secrets in her eyes. But something about her calculated observation of the generator in the market had triggered a memory of himself after the accident, when the Federation investigation had declared him incompetent, dangerous, expendable. He remembered how it felt to be viewed as worthless by people who couldn't see beyond the surface. "We'll figure this out," he said to the empty workshop, and turned his attention to the day's salvage. For 3 days, Echo remained nearly silent, communicating only through nods or shakes of her head when absolutely necessary. She kept to herself during the day, often sitting motionless for hours, watching Kale work. At night, she slept in short bursts, alert to any sound, the habit of someone who had learned that unconsciousness was vulnerability. Kale maintained a careful distance, continuing his routine of scavenging, repairing, and working on his ship. He spoke to her conversationally, explaining his projects as if she were an apprentice rather than a wary stranger, but never demanding responses. On the 4th day, he approached the subject of her arm. "I've been studying prosthetic systems," he said over breakfast, a nutritional pace that was bland but efficient. "Your design is unusual. Not Federation standard, not corporate either." He pulled out a data pad with schematics he'd drawn. "If you let me examine it, I might be able to repair some of the basic functions." Echo studied him for a long moment, then extended her damaged prosthetic arm across the small table. It was the first voluntary movement she'd made toward him, and Kale recognized the significance of the gesture. "Thank you," he said quietly, setting aside his food and retrieving a diagnostic scanner. Up close, the prosthetic was even more remarkable. Beneath the damaged exterior plating, the internal mechanisms were intricate and unfamiliar. Fluid channels alongside circuitry, neural interfaces more sophisticated than military models, power systems that seemed to draw energy from multiple sources simultaneously. Kale shook his head in amazement. "I've never seen anything like this. The integration points go beyond standard neural mapping. It's almost like..." He glanced up at Echo, whose dark eyes watched him intently. "It's almost like the system is designed to be an extension of thought rather than just movement. Is that right?" Echo's expression remained unreadable, but she didn't pull her arm away as Kale continued his examination. "The damage isn't as bad as it looks," he concluded after an hour. "The main power coupling is degraded, and there's interference in the neural pathways. I can fabricate a replacement coupling, but the neural integration will be trickier." He set down his tools. "I'll need a few days to gather materials." Echo retracted her arm and returned to her corner of the hangar, where Kale noticed she had begun arranging small metal components in complex geometric patterns when she thought he wasn't watching. That night, as Kale was drifting to sleep on his makeshift bed near the ship's hull, a violent sandstorm hit without warning. The hangar's exterior sensors shrieked an alarm as wind speeds exceeded safety thresholds. Kale bolted upright, cursing as he heard metal groaning overhead. "The northwestern support beam!" he shouted, grabbing tools as he ran toward the vulnerable section. "Echo, stay back." The beam in question, a crucial part of the hangar's structure, had been weakening for months. Kale had reinforced it twice, but proper replacement parts were impossible to find. Now, as the storm pummeled the building, the beam was finally giving way, threatening to collapse a quarter of the roof. Kale climbed the maintenance ladder, tools clenched between his teeth, fighting against the building's shuddering. He reached the beam and assessed the damage, worse than he'd feared. The joint was separating, and he couldn't hold it in place and weld it simultaneously. "Damn it," he growled, trying to brace the beam with his shoulder while reaching for his portable welder. A movement below caught his eye. Echo stood at the base of a ladder, her damaged prosthetic arm pointing upward. Before Kale could shout for her to take cover, something extraordinary happened. Her mechanical fingers splayed wide, and from the palm, a focused energy beam shot upward, striking the failing joint with surgical precision. The energy wasn't destructive. It was a targeted welding beam, far more precise than Kale's portable unit could manage. The beam held steady for 10 seconds, perfectly fusing the metal at the critical stress point. Then it sputtered and died, and Echo's prosthetic arm dropped limply to her side once more. Kale stared in disbelief, both at the perfectly executed repair and at Echo herself, who seemed as surprised as he was. She looked at her arm with a mixture of wonder and concern before backing away, retreating to her corner as if frightened by her own abilities. Kale descended the ladder slowly, mind racing. That wasn't just an advanced prosthetic. It was a technological marvel capable of functions he'd never imagined possible in a limb replacement. And Echo had used it instinctively, despite its apparent damage, to save his hanger, to help him. He approached her cautiously, finding her huddled in the corner, cradling her now inert prosthetic arm. He struggled for words. "Thank you. You saved my home." Echo looked up at him, and for the first time, her guard seemed to drop slightly. She nodded, a simple acknowledgement of his gratitude. "Your arm, that capability wasn't in any of the schematics I could detect," Kale continued, crouching to her eye level but maintaining distance. "I've never seen anything like it." Echo's good hand moved to her throat, where the shock collar remained embedded beneath her skin. Her fingers traced its outline, and her expression conveyed a clear message. Some technologies are kept secret for a reason. Kale nodded slowly. "I understand secrets. We all have them here." He stood and moved to his workbench, returning with a small medical scanner. "But now I'm even more determined to help you repair that arm properly, and to get that collar out. Will you let me?" After a long moment of consideration, Echo gave a single, definitive nod. The storm raged for 2 more days, confining them to the hangar. During that time, a shift occurred in their silent dynamic. Echo began to watch Kale's work more actively, occasionally moving pieces or tools into position before he asked for them. When he struggled with a complex circuit design, she used her finger to draw an alternative pattern in the dust on his workbench, a solution that, when implemented, worked perfectly. Kale, in turn, left technical manuals and component parts near her sleeping area, without comment or expectation. By the second evening, she had disassembled and reassembled 3 different power units, leaving them in improved condition. They developed a language of gestures, nods, and shared work, communication without words. Word escaped, and they've been hunting you ever since, Kale concluded. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking of the expensive chip he'd traded for her. "Well, whoever's looking for you might still be searching, but they won't find you easily here. Xylos is where people disappear." A shadow crossed Echo's face, and she shook her head, writing. "They always find." Kale was about to dismiss her concern. He'd successfully hidden from Federation authorities for 5 years, after all, when a distant, distinctive whine caught his attention. He moved quickly to the hangar's small observation window and cursed under his breath. Surveillance drone. Military grade, not local. He glanced back at Echo, who had gone very still. Not the usual patrol pattern either. Echo's expression confirmed his suspicion. Her pursuers were already closing in. The following days brought increasing signs of danger. More drones appeared, flying systematic search patterns over the settlement and surrounding dunes. Strangers in the market asked questions about recent slave sales. Kale's few contacts in Rust Haven warned him about a group of heavily armed individuals offering substantial rewards for information about a woman with a damaged cybernetic arm. Inside the hangar, Kale and Echo worked with urgent focus on 2 parallel projects, repairing her arm to full functionality and fortifying their defenses. During this time, Echo began to communicate more openly, though still primarily through writing. She explained her nature in fragments, between repairs and defensive preparations. Syntech rare. Born, not made. Old bloodline. How many others like you are there? Kale asked, as they calibrated sensor arrays to detect approaching vehicles. Few now. Hunted long time. Hidden colonies. And these people hunting you, who are they? Vorlach. Collector. Wants Syntech's secret. What secret? Echo hesitated, then wrote. Connection to ancient tech. Weapons. Power. And that's what your people can access? Ancient weapons systems. She shook her head firmly. More. Much more. Create, not just control. As the external threat grew, so did their partnership. Echo's arm gradually regained functionality as Kale fabricated replacement components, and she guided the neural recalibration. The enhancements she'd hidden from her captors began to resurface. The focused energy beam she'd used during the storm was just one of many capabilities built into what appeared to be a simple prosthetic, but was actually an extraordinary technological amplifier for her innate abilities. Kale shared his own story in return. The reactor accident that wasn't his fault, the Federation officials who needed a scapegoat, the 47 lives lost because a superior had ignored his safety warnings about a flawed design. He described his escape in a damaged maintenance vessel, the years hiding on Xylos, the gradual loss of hope that justice would ever be served. We're both running from systems that threw us away, he observed one evening as they shared a rare luxury. Actual bread, traded for a repaired water purifier. Both labeled as broken or dangerous. Echo, who had begun to speak occasional words in a soft, rarely used voice, looked at him thoughtfully. Not broken, she said. Just different value. The attack came at dawn, 7 days after they'd spotted the first drone. Kale was awakened by proximity, alarms blaring throughout the hangar. Echo was already up, her enhanced arm glowing with power as she activated defense systems they'd installed together. 8 vehicles approaching from the northwest, Kale reported, reading sensor data from a jury-rigged console. Heavy weapons signatures. Professional formation. He grabbed the modified pulse rifle he kept for extreme emergencies. This isn't a local gang. These are mercenaries. Echo nodded grimly. Vorlag, she said, the name clearly difficult for her to pronounce. She pointed to a schematic they'd prepared, their defense plan. They had known this day might come. The hangar was already rigged with traps, false targets, and automated defenses. Kale had installed reflective shielding to confuse targeting systems and modified the solar collectors to discharge electromagnetic pulses if triggered. Remember, we just need to hold them off long enough to reach the ship, Kale said, indicating his half-repaired vessel. It wasn't space-worthy, but they'd modified it to serve as a last-resort escape vehicle, capable of crossing Xylos' endless deserts to reach the distant northern settlements. Echo's expression was resolved, focused. Her once-damaged arm now hummed with energy, circuits glowing beneath partially transparent plating. In the week they'd worked together, Kale had helped her restore most of its functionality, and she'd revealed capabilities he never could have imagined. Not just the welding beam, but interfaces for virtually any technology, energy manipulation fields, and data transfer systems that could communicate with or override almost any computer. The mercenary struck with coordinated precision. Explosive charges detonated against the hangar's eastern wall, while sniper fire targeted the sensor arrays. Armored vehicles formed a perimeter, and combat drones swarmed overhead. Kale triggered the first wave of defenses. Mines buried in the surrounding sand, targeted EMP bursts that disabled 2 drones, and automated gun turrets that forced the ground troops to seek cover. They're better equipped than I expected, he admitted as enemy fire intensified. A section of the roof collapsed as a missile struck, showering them with debris. Echo didn't respond verbally. Instead, she extended her enhanced arm toward an access panel and interfaced directly with the hangar systems. Instantly, the building's remaining defenses coordinated with new efficiency. Power rerouting to shields, ventilation fans reversing to blow obscuring sand at attackers, repair drones deploying to critical structure points. Through the newly formed hole in the roof, Kale caught sight of a commanding figure observing the battle from atop an armored transport. The man was tall, with a cybernetic eye that glowed red even in the morning sunlight, and a posture that radiated cold authority. Is that him? Forlag. Echo followed his gaze and tensed visibly. She nodded once, her expression hardening. Attention! The amplified voice boomed across the battlefield, silencing even the weapon's fire momentarily. I'm Commander Forlag of Helix Special Operations. We have no quarrel with you, scavenger. Surrender the Syntech woman, and you may keep your life and property. Kale glanced at Echo, whose eyes never left the distant figure of Forlag. He's lying, Kale said. They'll kill me either way. I've seen what you can do. Yes, she whispered, and the simple confirmation carried a weight of resolved determination. The hangar shuddered as another explosion tore through their defenses. A squad of mercenaries breached the western entrance, only to be repelled by a cleverly concealed automated defense system. An old cargo loader Echo had reprogrammed to function as a combat mech. We need to move toward the ship, Kale urged, firing his pulse rifle at a drone that had penetrated through the roof breach. The hangar won't hold much longer. Echo nodded, but instead of retreating, she moved toward a central control console they'd constructed from salvaged parts. Need time, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Can stop them, but need power. Kale understood immediately. The main reactor? It's unstable. We've never tested it at full capacity. Only chance. Her enhanced arm connected to the console, the interface points matching perfectly with ports they designed together. Trust me, despite the chaos, Kale felt a moment of clarity. 7 days ago, Echo had been merchandise, valued at merely 10 credits. Now she stood as his ally, his friend, perhaps something more, a person whose true worth couldn't be measured in credits or components. I trust you, he said. What do you need me to do? Defend this position. 3 minutes. As she spoke, her eyes began to shine with the same subtle glow as her enhanced arm, technology and humanity merging in ways Kale could barely comprehend. He took a defensive position, using fallen debris as cover. The mercenaries were advancing from multiple directions now, their initial caution replaced by aggressive confidence as the hangar's automated defenses began to fail. Whatever you're doing, do it fast, Kale shouted as he exchanged fire with 3 attackers. A blast singed his shoulder, and he grunted in pain. Echo didn't respond. Her entire being seemed focused on the connection with the console, her enhanced arm now pulsing with energy drawn from the hangar's reactor. Data streams flowed visibly through the transparent sections of her technology, and the air around her distorted with power. Outside, something unexpected happened. The mercenaries' weapons began to malfunction. Their vehicles stalled. Communication devices emitted painful feedback screams. Even their cybernetic enhancements, eyes, limbs, targeting systems, began to glitch and fail. Through the collapsed roof section, Kale saw Forlag shouting orders, his composure cracking as his carefully orchestrated attack dissolved into chaos. The commander's cybernetic eye sparked and went dark, and he tore it from its socket with a howl of rage. Now! Echo's voice rang with newfound strength. She disengaged from the console and staggered slightly, energy still crackling around her enhanced arm. To the ship, they ran for the partially repaired vessel as the hangar's remaining systems overloaded around them, creating a barrier of electrical discharge and system failures that kept the disorganized mercenaries at bay. Echo had somehow created a cascading technological disruption that affected all external systems while preserving their own equipment. They reached the ship and sealed the entry hatch just as Forlag, now leading a squad personally, broke through the disruption field. The commander's face was a mask of fury, blood streaking from his empty eye socket. "Start the engines!" Echo shouted as she connected her enhanced arm to the ship's control systems. "I'll handle navigation." Kale activated the makeshift propulsion system they'd cobbled together, not powerful enough for orbit, but sufficient to carry them across Xylo's surface. The ship shuddered as it powered up, systems coming online in rapid sequence as Echo interfaced directly with them. "You think you can escape me?" Forlag's voice boomed over a commandeered speaker system. "There's nowhere on this planet you can hide. Syntech, I've spent a decade hunting your kind. Your colonies are ashes. You're the last. Echo's expression flickered with pain at his words, but her connection to the ship never wavered. Not last, she whispered, though only Kale could hear her. Others safe. Hidden. The ship lurched forward, breaking through the weakened hangar wall as engines ignited with unexpected power. Kale gripped the manual controls, but quickly realized Echo was doing most of the piloting through her direct interface, her enhanced abilities allowing her to push the cobbled-together systems beyond their design capabilities. Behind them, Forlag's troops opened fire, but their weapons were still malfunctioning, shots going wild. One of their vehicles exploded as a power core overloaded, another cascading effect of whatever Echo had done. They'll follow, Kale warned as they accelerated across the desert, sand spraying in their wake. No, Echo said with quiet confidence. Not immediately. She nodded toward the horizon behind them, where a massive wall of swirling sand was forming. A sandstorm of unusual intensity, precisely along their escape route. Natural phenomenon. Helped it along. Kale stared at her in amazement. You can influence weather patterns? No. A small smile touched her lips. Just probability. Weather systems are. Technology, too. Of a kind. Her enhanced arms sparked slightly, and she winced. Limited range. Temporary. But enough. As they sped north, putting distance between themselves and Forlag's forces, Kale allowed himself to believe, for the first time, that they might actually escape. I've been running for 5 years, he said. Never thought I'd leave that hangar except in a pine box or a Fed prison transport. Echo's gaze remained focused on the ship's navigation display. Still running, she observed. Yes, but not alone anymore. He glanced at her. That matters. Her expression softened. Yes, matters much. They traveled for 2 days, pushing the ship to its limits, stopping only to make essential repairs when systems overheated or failed. Echo's connection to the technology allowed them to navigate treacherous terrain and avoid settlements where news of their escape might have reached. On the dawn of the 3rd day, as they crested a massive dune in the northern wastes, Echo suddenly tensed. Stop, she commanded. Kale brought the ship to a halt atop the dune. What is it? Forlag. She shook her head, then pointed to a vast, seemingly empty expanse below. There, at first, Kale saw nothing, just more desert, indistinguishable from the thousands of miles they'd already crossed. Then, as the first sun crested the horizon, its light caught something metallic beneath the shifting sands, a hint of structure, geometric and deliberate, mostly buried but unmistakably artificial. What am I looking at? He asked. Echo's voice was quiet, reverent. Sanctuary. Ancient place. Syntech haven. Understanding dawned slowly. A hidden colony? Here on Xylos. She nodded. Deep. Safe. Her enhanced arm extended toward the buried structure, and for a moment, light patterns coursed across the sand, as if in response. They will welcome us. How long has this been here? Kale asked, amazed that such a facility could exist undetected on a planet he'd thought he knew. Always, Echo said simply. Before Federation. Before Helix. She looked at him, her dark eyes now clear and direct. My name is Lyra. The simple statement, her true name, freely given, felt more significant than any technology they'd encountered. Lyra, Kale repeated, feeling the weight of the trust behind it. As they prepared to descend toward the hidden structure, Kale remembered something. He reached into a storage compartment and withdrew the quantum processing chip, the one he had traded for Lyra. Except he hadn't really traded it away at all. Before giving it to Jax, he had secretly swapped it with a similar but much less valuable component, keeping the original safe. It had been his insurance policy, his last hope for eventually repairing his ship enough to escape Xylos. This was supposed to be my way out, he said, holding up the chip. Funny how things work out. Lyra looked at the chip, then extended her non-enhanced hand toward it. May I? Kale handed it to her without hesitation. She examined it carefully, then connected it to her enhanced arm through a nearly invisible port. Her eyes widened. This is not just processor, she said, her voice gaining confidence with each word. Hidden data. Ancient schematics. Star maps. What? Kale moved closer, watching as data streams projected faintly from her enhanced arm. Complex technical diagrams and astronomical charts unlike any Federation standard. I found it in a military wreck years ago. I thought it was just a high-grade navigation processor. Hidden in plain sight, Lyra said. Syntech method. Information valuable enough to die for. Or to live for. What kind of information? Locations. Other sanctuaries. Technologies lost for centuries. Her eyes met his. This chip alone worth more than all of Rusthaven. Kale laughed softly, and I nearly traded it for 10 credits worth of water filters. You traded it for me, Lyra corrected, a hint of warmth in her voice. Best deal I ever made, he replied without hesitation. The ship descended toward the hidden sanctuary, and as they approached, the sand shifted, revealing entry points and reception areas that had been invisible from above. Subtle energy fields, not Federation technology, not corporate, but something older and more elegant, guided their approach. They're expecting us, Kale realized. Lyra nodded. My signal. Recognized. Family waiting. As their ship settled onto a landing platform that rose from the sand to meet them, Kale felt a strange mixture of emotions. 4 or 5 years, he had lived in isolation, focused solely on survival and the bitter memory of injustice. Now, because he had seen value where others saw only brokenness, he was arriving at a sanctuary he never knew existed, alongside a woman whose true worth couldn't be measured in credits. The entry portal opened, revealing figures waiting to greet them. People with subtle technological enhancements similar to Lyra's, their expressions cautious but welcoming. Lyra's face lit up with recognition and relief. Home, she whispered, the word carrying years of longing. Kale watched her transformation, from silent, withdrawn captive to a woman reconnecting with her people, and knew he had made the right choice in that marketplace. Lyra turned to him before stepping out to meet her kin. You saved me, she said. Now, together, we rebuild. Rebuild what? Kale asked. She smiled fully for the first time since he'd met her, her entire being radiating purpose. Everything. The past. The future. She held up the quantum chip. Beginning with this. As they stepped together from the ship into the hidden sanctuary, Kale realized that on a planet where everything had a price, some things remained beyond value. Courage, connection, and the simple act of seeing worth in what others discard. Behind them, the sands of Xylos shifted again, concealing the sanctuary from those who would exploit it. Forlag and his mercenaries might still search. The Federation might still hunt for a scapegoat engineer. But here, beneath the desert, something new had begun. For the first time in 5 years, Kale wasn't running from the past. He was walking toward a future. Welcome home, Lyra said, taking his hand as they crossed the threshold together. And he was home, not because of a place, but because they had found in each other something the market could never properly value: recognition of each other's true worth.